Murchison Boundary, late morning. A young elephant bull stood near the edge of the outer fence, his right front leg bent unnaturally at the joint, twisted where the wire cinched deep into flesh. The ground beneath him was packed and stained dark, a shallow pool of dried blood marking the hours he had stood without moving. He did not cry out. He did not sway. Only his ears flicked now and then, not in warning, but to push at the gathering flies. The wire trap, likely set days ago for smaller game, had wound itself once, then twice, then pulled tight with his struggle. The metal had cut through the thick outer skin and into the muscle. Below the snare, his leg had begun to swell and discolor. Ranger Eli saw him from the north ridge, binoculars resting on his chest when the shape pulled his focus. He signaled to Kojo. 200 meters behind him, and together they walked toward the fence line, boots brushing over dry acacia pods. The sun had risen high, and heat shimmered off the soil in slow waves. No birds called, no herds moved. The silence around the elephant was full, the kind of silence that gathers around pain. They stopped at 50 meters. Eli raised one hand slowly and lowered his voice. "He's not moving," he said. The elephant's head did not lift. Only his left ear twitched once. There was no aggression, no lift of the trunk, and no posture of defiance. He was still, like something too exhausted to guard itself. Eli took a step forward, then paused again. The decision had to be made without words. Move too quickly and the elephant might panic and rip the leg worse. Wait too long, and the tissue damage would reach the bone. Infection was already a risk. If they waited for sedation support, he might fall, and if he fell, he might not rise again. If they moved, they had one chance to cut clean and free. Eli circled wide to the left, keeping his body low, his eyes down. Kojo held back near the brush, watching the elephant's breathing. It was shallow, slow. Each exhale pushed dust off the surface of his trunk, which rested like a fallen branch against the fence post. The smell of blood, sharp and metallic, hung low in the heat. Flies gathered in clusters around the wound, crawling across raw muscle and dried hide. The leg shook once, then stilled again. Eli stopped within arm's reach. He bent slowly and let his hand hover just above the wire. The metal glinted, rusted in some parts, taut and smooth where the tension held. With his free hand, he unrolled a canvas pouch and withdrew the cutter. The elephant did not flinch. His eye, milky at the edge but wide, watched Eli's hands, then flicked once toward the brush. Still no movement to resist. Still no panic. The cutter closed on the top loop. One breath, one snip. The first coil broke with a soft snap, tension recoiling through the lower line. The elephant groaned. Not loud, but long and hollow, a sound pushed from deep in the chest. His leg shifted, shaking once more. Eli held still. The second loop came loose faster, drawn back with a tug. Blood welled fresh, thick and dark, but the wire was off. The elephant pulled his leg back a step, stumbled slightly, then caught himself. He didn't run. He didn't turn. He simply stood, eyes lowered, trunk curling under for a moment before falling again. The wire trap lay limp on the ground beside him, its form now useless, bent from the weight it had held. Eli stepped back slowly, his boots leaving clean prints in the dust. The elephant watched but did not follow. The silence returned, but this time lighter. Not absence, but breath. The first step had been taken. But what happened next would decide everything. If he moved too fast, the leg might fail. If infection had set in deeper, there would be little time. If he wandered too far, no help would reach him. They could not know what came next. They only knew this: the wire was gone, but the story was not over. Eli stepped back and watched. The young bull had not moved beyond that single stagger, though his weight had shifted off the injured leg. The wire lay nearby, curled like something dead. Blood still seeped in slow pulses from the wound, soaking the dusty skin and falling in fat drops to the soil. The air around the clearing felt tighter now, the kind of tension that comes not from fear, but from waiting. Eli lifted the radio on his chest and gave a single call. Kojo and Mari were close, just past the eastern ridge, and within minutes they emerged, carrying the kit: gauze, fluid packs, antiseptic wash, and spare wire cutters in case more loops hid beneath the skin. No one spoke. Every motion was rehearsed but never routine. The elephant stayed still. Not from trust, but fatigue. His trunk coiled slightly at the tip, then fell limp again. A low hum rumbled from his chest, almost like breath catching beneath weight. Kojo circled left, crouching near the rear leg to watch for tension in the spine. Mari opened the kit and unwrapped the rolled saline line. Eli walked forward again, slowly, hand out. The same soft line left his mouth as before. "It's all right, boy." The bull didn't react to the voice. His ears had dropped farther now, no longer twitching. The wound had darkened with dirt and blood, and the swelling near the knee had increased since the first cut. It was clear now: muscle damage, risk of tendon strain. If the infection moved higher into the joint, he could lose the leg. If they didn't clean it properly, he'd go septic within days. If he collapsed, they wouldn't be able to lift him. The time for hesitation had passed. They had minutes, not hours. Mari stepped in first. Her hands moved gently but without pause. She squeezed fluid down the open groove in the leg, flushing the blood from the upper tear. The elephant jerked slightly, shifting his weight again, and Eli reached to steady his flank. Not force, just presence. The skin was warm beneath his palm. Tense. The kind of tension that holds breath. Kojo moved closer, gauze ready. They patted down the sides, cleaning the areas where the wire had burned into the hide. It had torn deep. Fibers clung to the wound, and in one spot, bone pressed faintly beneath the swelling. The elephant groaned again. Not loud, just a shift in breath, a low vibration that rattled through his ribs. He lifted his head slightly, eyes wide, unblinking, but he did not bolt. He didn't lean away. That was enough. Kojo threaded the antibiotic solution slowly across the cleaned surface, careful not to press. Eli leaned closer, brushing flies away with the back of his arm. "Almost there," he murmured. It wasn't for comfort, it was rhythm. His voice, their motion, the hum of shared air. They wrapped the leg quickly, 2 passes of clean gauze and a stretch of padded band. No sedative had been used. The choice had been clear from the start. If he went down, he might not rise again. If he stayed standing, they had to finish before adrenaline turned to panic. His body swayed once, knees shaking slightly, but he caught himself. Mari stood back. Eli let his hand fall from the elephant's side. Kojo moved away last, slowly stepping out of the arc of the trunk. The team stood still, watching. The bandage was firm but not tight, designed to hold only long enough for clotting and movement. The leg was still bleeding, but not heavily now. What mattered was what happened next. If he lies down tonight, the wound might clot in place. If he walked, the bandage might hold. If infection had already entered the bloodstream, there was nothing more they could do. They had given him the only chance he'd get. He blinked once. His trunk lifted briefly, hovering near his own leg, then fell back. The blood had slowed. The worst was past. But they didn't know yet if it would be enough. The gauze held. The bleeding had slowed. For several minutes, no one moved. The young bull's body remained still, head low, trunk curled loosely beneath him like a fallen rope. His front leg trembled at the joint, the pressure building now that the sharp restraint was gone. His eyes, dull with pain, blinked once, then again, slowly. The silence returned in full, the kind of stillness that lingers when the work is done, but the outcome is still unknown. Eli stayed crouched nearby, knees aching beneath him. eyes fixed on the subtle rise and fall of the elephant's chest. They had done all they could. Now it was his turn to choose. Kojo shifted behind him. Mari didn't speak. The only sound was the wind moving low across the short grass and the rhythmic exhale of the animal's labored breath. Flies circled lazily, returning to the raw scent, but not as thickly now. The deep cut no longer bled in streams, only in faint, slow pulses from the edges. The leg was held just above the ground, as though still testing the weight. Then, without sound or signal, the trunk uncoiled and brushed the earth gently, almost searching. The elephant exhaled hard. His ears lifted slightly, then stilled again. He shifted his back legs first, muscles pulling tight across the haunches. His shoulders leaned forward, and with one push, he rose. Not quickly. Not with force, just slow, deliberate motion, an effort pulled from something deep and quiet. The wounded leg trembled, then held. The gauze pressed tightly across the wound but did not fall. He stood, heavy and uneven, and held his weight in place. The team didn't move. No applause, no call, no relief yet. Standing was only the beginning. His trunk lifted partway, as if tasting the air. One step forward, barely a full pace, and he paused again. The bandaged leg touched down for the first time, bearing only a fraction of his weight. A low grunt pushed from his chest, not pained, only strained. Another step, this time more stable. His head turned slightly toward Eli, eyes flicking to the movement of his hand, still resting palm up just above the dust. Then the elephant turned away, gaze shifting beyond them. Eli followed the line of sight. Far off, near the edge of the low thicket, something moved. Not large, not urgent. Just a brief flicker of shadow where the brush had been still before. Eli narrowed his eyes, slowly rising. The elephant had paused mid-step now, one ear angled back. Another movement in the same place, quick, subtle, and too low to be a bird. A shape, no taller than a log, shifting quietly along the dust line. Then a sound, soft, broken. A high-pitched note that faded as soon as it rose. Not a cry, not quite a call. The elephant took another step forward. His posture changed, not alarmed but alert. The trunk lifted again, this time stretching toward the sound. Mari stepped closer to Eli and spoke low. "He's looking for something." Kojo didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the brush. The team had assumed the bull had been alone. He was young, but not small. Old enough to roam without his mother, but not yet part of a male group. But elephants did not always follow the pattern, and the way he stood now, quiet, steady, and facing the sound, suggested something else. The brush rustled again. Then stillness. The sound didn't return. The elephant shifted, his stance uneven but deliberate. His body remained open, ears slightly wide, trunk suspended midair like a question. Eli stepped back once more. The bull did not follow. He didn't walk away either. He simply watched the thicket, breathing hard through his swollen chest, blood still drying across his foreleg. The relief that had begun to take root shifted again. If there was another elephant nearby, possibly injured or worse, the situation had not resolved, only changed shape. Eli lowered his voice again, almost a whisper. "What else is out there?" The team watched, the elephant waited, and in the distance the brush moved once more, slower this time, purposeful. Something was coming. The sound came again, thin and uneven, just beyond the far cluster of acacia. Not loud, not urgent. More like something trying to rise but catching in the throat. The bull turned his head fully now, facing the source. His body, which had just begun to settle into stillness, shifted again with alertness. His front leg bent slightly as though ready to step forward, though pain clearly pinned him where he stood. The sound was unmistakable this time. A calf, very young, not calling in panic but in disoriented distress, the kind that came from being alone too long or hurt in stillness. Eli raised a hand slowly toward the others, motioning them to pause. The young bull didn't move again, but his ears fanned wide and his trunk lifted into the air, swaying faintly. He was listening with his whole body. He had not cried out himself. He had not moved to flee, even when freed. And now it was clear why. He hadn't stayed because he was wounded. He'd stayed because something else was nearby. Something smaller, dependent. A second elephant they hadn't seen. The brush beyond the acacia was thick and tangled, the kind of terrain that absorbed sound and scattered shadows. A calf in there could stay hidden for hours without being found unless it called, and even then, the dry season wind muddled distance. Eli took a few steps forward, staying low, scanning the gaps between branches. The cry came again, shorter this time, a breath broken by sand. It was getting weaker. Kojo stepped forward beside him. Voice low. "That's not a mother," he said. Eli nodded once. The bull remained in place but had angled his body toward the thicket. His weight shifted again, just barely. The bandaged leg trembled with the strain of standing so long, but he didn't rest it. His trunk had lowered and now swept in wide arcs just above the soil, moving toward the sound. There was no panic, no charge, and no display. But the intention was clear. He was listening for someone he already knew. The team had misread the situation. He wasn't just a lone, injured juvenile. He was something else now, perhaps the only thing standing between a calf and the worst outcomes of isolation. Eli motioned for Mari to circle wide. Kojo followed close behind. The bush thinned slightly near the base of the ridge, and as they angled into it, the brush thickened again with sharp, low thorns. Progress slowed to a careful crawl. Then, in a shallow pocket of dry earth beneath a leaning branch, they saw the shape. Small, folded in on itself. The calf lay on its side, legs curled under, trunk limp against the ground. Not newborn, but not far from it. No tusks yet, ears still soft around the edges. Her breathing was visible but irregular. No wounds were immediately apparent, but her skin was caked with dirt, and her back leg twitched in small, involuntary spasms. Mari crouched nearby, not touching, only watching. The calf lifted her head slightly, one eye cracking open just enough to register light. No cry this time. Just a long, low exhale. Her body smelled of dehydration and dust. She hadn't walked here. She had been here for hours, possibly longer. Eli approached slowly from the side, gaze sweeping between her form and the path behind. There were no adult tracks, just the faint, disorganized prints of the bull from earlier, moving back and forth between this spot and the fence line. That was the missing link. The bull hadn't wandered into the snare by chance. He had been circling this calf, watching, guarding, and, in the process, had stepped too far toward the perimeter. The calf was not his child. He was far too young, but she had been left, or lost, or abandoned, and he had stayed. A juvenile no more than a few years older, standing guard over a sibling or an orphaned newborn for reasons no one could guess. Eli stepped back. "She's still alive," he said quietly. Kojo nodded but didn't reply. The calf tried to shift again, its front leg pushing weakly against the soil, then slipping. Her energy was low. If she wasn't rehydrated soon, she would not survive the night. But if they intervened too forcefully, they risked driving the bull away, or worse, sending her into panic. Every choice ahead carried weight. And the stakes were plain now. If they left her here, she might not wake. If they separated her from him, she might not calm down. If they waited too long, both might fall. The second cry had changed everything. Now, there were two lives hanging in balance. The dust settled in fine layers along the ground as Eli and Mari stepped further into the underbrush. Each movement stirred a soft haze that drifted around their ankles and rose in quiet swirls before settling again. The sound had gone still, but they trusted the direction. The last cry had been close, and the path between branches showed fresh disturbance. Narrow hoof marks, small and uneven, led downslope toward a shallow cut in the land where the rains had once run, but now held only silence and heat. The brush opened slightly at the base of the gully, revealing an uneven patch of dry soil pressed with the weight of something too young to rise on its own. She lay half-curled in the low spot, body small against the wide stretch of land. Her skin was gray and dry, still soft in places where the folds had not thickened and coated in a thin crust of silt. Dust clung to the folds around her legs, across her ears, and along the side of her face where she had pressed into the ground. One eye was barely open, the other remained hidden. Her legs did not move. Only the rise of her belly showed that she was still alive. Mari crouched nearby, hands open and slow, saying nothing. The calf didn't flinch. She barely registered the presence. Her breathing was shallow, the rhythm of something past the edge of energy. There was no visible injury, no blood. But her dehydration was advanced, her mouth dry and slack, the tongue barely lifting when breath pushed through. She had not fed in days, and she was not yet old enough to eat from the land. Eli scanned the gully's slope, noting the absence of larger prints. There was no sign of a mother. No adult female had circled here, and there was no sign of recent feeding or rest. Only the light tracks of a larger juvenile, heavier than hers but lighter than a full-grown bull, pacing back and forth along the upper ridge. They had been right. The injured elephant had stayed near this place, not because he couldn't move, but because he wouldn't leave. The question of their relationship, once vague, now sat in plain view. The calf stirred faintly when he called earlier, and when he turned toward the sound, it hadn't been curiosity, it had been recognition. A rustle from above drew their attention. Kojo had stopped halfway down the slope, standing between the calf and the path. Behind him, the young bull had stepped closer, just a few meters from where the brush began to thin. His steps were uneven, but his ears had perked slightly, and his head was lifted. The gauze still clung to his leg, stained now with dirt and slow seepage, but he stood balanced. He didn't bellow or push forward. He simply waited. His eyes scanned the gully and settled on the motionless calf. Eli stepped back slowly, watching the bull's posture. It remained open, not tense, but focused. The bond between them, whatever form it took, had kept them alive longer than nature usually allowed. A calf this young could not survive on its own, and a juvenile bull, no longer nursing, would not usually stay behind. But somehow they had. Whether by chance or instinct, the older one had become her last defense against the wild. And now she was weakening. Kojo knelt and uncapped the hydration flask. He didn't move toward her yet. The decision would take care. Force could fracture everything. If the bull felt threatened, he might bolt or intervene, but if they waited too long, she would lose the strength to swallow. The window was narrow. The balance was fragile. They couldn't sedate, couldn't carry, and couldn't risk scaring either of them. The safest option, and the hardest, was to bring them back together and hope it changed what happened next. Mari lowered her voice. Calm and steady. We'll try with both of them here. No one disagreed. The risk was clear. If the bull reacted badly, they'd lose their only chance. If the calf collapsed further, no help would be possible. If they acted too soon, they might destroy the fragile connection that had held through the night. But if it worked, if even for a moment the older one stayed close and calm, it might give her just enough strength to rise. The wind shifted lightly, rustling the dry tops of the acacia. The bull blinked slowly, then took one quiet step down the slope. The calf stirred. A breath caught. The dust held still around them. Nothing more was said. The land listened. The bull moved slowly down the slope, dust rising around each step as his injured leg adjusted beneath him. He didn't make a sound. His movements were deliberate. guided not by urgency but by something quieter, recognition perhaps, or memory. The calf stirred again, her body twitching in a weak response to the vibration of his approach. Her ears shifted slightly, just enough to lift a film of dirt. The rangers remained where they were. No one spoke. No one moved forward. The space between the elephants was sacred now, and they knew better than to cross it too soon. He reached her side and lowered his trunk carefully, letting the tip brush across her back in a slow arc. The contact wasn't firm. It was barely there, just enough pressure to register his presence. She exhaled faintly. Her legs didn't move, but her spine flexed with the sound, and her head rolled slightly toward him. The bull continued, circling around her body with uneven steps. Each time he shifted his weight onto the wounded leg, his body faltered, but he never stopped. Dust clung to the bandage. His flank had darkened with sweat. Still, he moved with purpose. When he reached her head, he paused. His trunk hovered above her face, then dropped gently to rest along her cheek. The calf's eyes opened slightly, one more than the other. Her trunk, short and curled tight against her chest, fluttered once in response. The contact held for several seconds before the bull moved again, placing himself just behind her curled body, legs firm, chest rising in slow rhythm. He stood there, unmoving, as if taking watch, not dominant, not fearful, just present. The rangers began their slow repositioning. Kojo moved first, stepping along the outer ridge to find a better view without closing the distance. Mari uncapped the rehydration pouch again but didn't advance. The hydration had to come soon, but not before the calf was fully aware. Any stress now could undo everything. She was stable but faint. If they moved too soon, she might react and burn the last of her strength. If they waited too long, her system could shut down. The balance remained razor-thin. The bull made no attempt to stop them. He watched, always from the edge of his own stillness. When Mari moved closer, he didn't lift his trunk or widen his ears. He remained where he was, his body acting as a barrier without force. The calf stirred again, and this time her trunk moved slightly toward the scent of the pouch. It wasn't full interest, but it was enough to try. Mari dropped to a crouch and extended her hand slowly, resting the spout on the edge of a small, flat stone in front of the calf's mouth. The bull didn't blink. His eyes stayed on her hands. When the calf lifted her head enough to sniff the opening, the first sip didn't come, but the second did. Just one shallow slurp, followed by another pause. Her energy was nearly gone, but instinct remained. The third sip was longer, then a swallow. Mari did not move closer. The calf continued, one breath at a time, drawing in liquid in tiny, shaking pulls, and still, the bull remained. The team watched as the quiet act of survival unfolded. The calf fed. The bull stood. No one else moved. Every choice had led to this: the bull's decision to stay, the calf's ability to call once more, and the team's choice not to separate them. If he had left, she would have died alone. If they had rushed, she might have panicked. The bond between them, though not blood, had become the only reason either still breathed. Two orphans, not old enough to lead, but old enough to hold each other there. A breeze stirred through the gully, brushing through the dry grass and rustling the brush above. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows from their still forms. In the silence, nothing felt resolved, yet something had shifted. The calf rested her head back down, the edge of her trunk still curled loosely toward the water pouch. The bull blinked once, then turned his head toward the horizon. The moment held steady, untouched by time. The light had softened by late afternoon, spreading low across the gully floor in long bands of pale gold. The calf's breathing had steadied into a shallow rhythm, not strong, but consistent. Her trunk moved faintly now with each breath, and when Mari placed the hydration pouch a little closer, she responded without prompting, a slow draw of water. then another. Her body had not shifted since that first lift of the head, but her awareness had returned. Eli watched her eyes track slightly now as movement passed near. The strength to rise, though, still hadn't come. Her limbs remained folded, caught under the weight of days without nursing and perhaps an injury they hadn't seen yet. The bull hadn't left her side. He had moved only once, to circle behind her again, and now stood there, his front legs stiff and squared, as if holding the ground for both of them. His bandage had loosened at the edge. A thin line of red dust clung to the edge where the wound had reopened. He shifted slightly, favoring the leg, but didn't back away. He had accepted their presence for now, but each step closer still required permission. Eli knelt beside the straps, thick canvas looped into long supports that had been used in similar cases, usually with slightly older calves, usually with stronger odds. He glanced toward Kojo, who gave the quiet nod they'd been waiting for. The window had come. If she was going to stand, it had to be now, while the light still held and the heat had broken just enough. If they waited until dusk, her muscles would cool. If they pushed too hard, she could collapse again and take the last of her energy with her. The moment was narrow, but it was real. He approached slowly, dragging the folded straps in a wide arc, showing her the movement with care. The calf didn't flinch. Her body stirred once as his hand passed her flank, but she did not pull away. Mari moved to the other side, mirroring the approach, eyes flicking once toward the bull. He watched, trunk curled slightly under him, breathing low and audibly. His posture had not changed, steady, unflinching, eyes tracking every motion. Eli whispered, "Almost there," and slid the first loop beneath her belly. The calf groaned softly when they began. Not pain, more a sound of confusion, of instinct trying to wake inside a body not yet ready. Eli reached over and guided the second loop through, Mari tightening just enough to cradle her middle. The straps wouldn't lift her. They would only hold, offer enough support for her to find her own balance. The last adjustment clicked into place. Kojo stepped forward, grasped the center strap, and together, the three of them began to draw it taut. Her legs twitched. First the front, then a stutter in the back. The calf tried to push upward once but slipped. Her trunk dragged across the earth. A pause followed. Eli looked toward the bull, who remained fixed, head slightly lowered now, as if reading the shift in her body before the next attempt began. The calf pushed again. This time her forelegs extended fully, hooves trembling with the effort. The strap pulled taut across her belly. Mari held steady. Kojo tightened slightly. She rose, not quickly and not all at once, but first the front, then the back, until the fold of her spine straightened and her chest lifted from the dust. Her knees wobbled. Her head hung low, but she was standing. Her breath caught, then steadied. The strap held firm around her ribs, holding just enough weight to let her bones align. Her tail shifted. Her ears moved once, and then, for the first time, she turned her head fully toward the bull. He stepped forward once and let out a low, deep vibration, a sound that traveled across the space between them like breath passed from one chest to another. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a call. It was a sound of presence, of recognition. The calf blinked. Her trunk lifted an inch off the ground, then another, and she stood there, shaking but upright, supported by canvas and Will, with him just beside her. What remained ahead was still uncertain. She could fall again. Infection could still rise. The bull's leg might worsen. They might not survive the next night without medical care, but at that moment, both stood, in silence, in light, and the team, hands still gripping the canvas, did not move. A breeze passed through the upper branches. The straps held, her legs held, his gaze held, and for now, that was enough. The straps were removed in silence. No words, no signals. Just practiced careful motion, hands moving across fabric darkened with dust and dried salt. The calf had remained standing for nearly an hour, held first by tension, then by will. Her legs were still trembling, and her back sagged slightly under her own weight, but she hadn't collapsed. The hydration had settled in her belly. Her breaths came steadier now. She blinked often, adjusting to the movement of air against skin that had lain still too long. And beside her, the bull had not shifted more than a step. His presence had remained constant, not instructing her, but anchoring her. Eli gave a soft nod, and Kojo stepped back first, allowing space to form around them. The straps, once drawn tight around her ribs, were now looped loosely at her feet, useless but no longer needed. She didn't lean or fall. She simply stood, swaying faintly, her trunk brushing once against her brother's leg. He lifted his own and stepped forward. The movement was deliberate. Not fast, not graceful. The bull's bandage had torn along the edge during the earlier shift, and fresh blood marked his gait with small, uneven spots in the sand. But he didn't limp. He walked with the quiet defiance of something that had waited long enough. The calf followed, her first 2 steps shallow, scraping the ground with each drag. Then her hooves lifted fully, then a 3rd step, steadier. Her ears flicked once. Her head rose. The team watched without intervening. The job was finished. Not because the animals were safe, but because they were now beyond help in the way only the wild could provide. The elephants moved up the gentle slope of the ridge, back toward the thinned tree line where Eli had first spotted the bull the morning before. The sky had shifted to low amber, streaked with the gray of distant smoke from a controlled burn 2 valleys away. The sun hung just above the rim of the west hills, painting the ground in warm light that caught the curve of the calf's spine and the rise of the bull's shoulders. They paused only once. Near the crest, where the boundary markers of the protected range faded into the natural bush, the calf hesitated. Her legs wobbled. Her trunk reached back, touching the dirt. The bull stopped, turned halfway, and waited. One long breath passed between them, and she stepped forward again. The space between their bodies closed. She leaned into him, and he steadied his weight toward her. Together, they walked on. Eli remained still. His boots pressed into the warm soil, arms slack at his sides. Kojo stood a few paces away, watching the curve of the hill. Mari had already stepped back, letting the last moments pass without observation. There would be no tracking, no follow-up. The risk remained, for infection, for fatigue, for unseen threats that came with nightfall. But there was no longer a role for people in their story. What remained was theirs to carry, however far it went. At the top of the ridge, just before the horizon pulled them from view, the bull turned once. Not long, not in pause, just enough to glance back toward the figures behind him. The light caught his eyes, tired, dark, open. Then he faced forward again and walked into the bush, the calf close behind, her steps real now, not held by canvas or will, but her own. The last light touched the tops of the dry grass and faded slowly into shadow. Wind moved low across the open stretch, bending the taller stalks in gentle arcs. No sounds followed, no calls, no cries, just the soft hush of movement returning to the land, a quiet that carried something different now, something left behind in their wake.